I did come across some additional news about The Mandalorian Season 2. There's been casting announcements going fast and furious. We talked about the Bo-Katan, Katie Sackhoff, being announced that she's going to be involved in the live action, in the Mandalorian. And so it says, this is a Gizmodo article from yesterday. And it says, well, the Mandalorian Boba Fett situation might have just gotten a whole lot more interesting. And so what we have here is the Mandalorian second season already has enough interesting things going on. Baby Yoda, Saber's Dark, before it started heaping on the prospects of bringing back a few familiar faces, including the seemingly ominous return of Boba Fett. But a new report suggests things aren't quite going to go the way many people have expected. Last week, The Hollywood Reporter got word that Deadwood and Justified icon Timothy Olyphant, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering his name, Olyphant, had joined the cast of The Mandalorian second season, but the trade was uncertain about just who he would be playing. Now, it looks like iFilm is reporting that the character will wear Boba Fett's armor this season, but will not be Boba Fett. It's a weird situation, but it could mean that he is playing a familiar character from Star Wars canon. It's potentially he's playing a character named Cobb Vanth. I have no familiarity with this character whatsoever. And it says, a character you may not have heard of, but has very important connotations to the story of Boba Fett in the rebooted canon of the galaxy far, far away. It says, in Chuck Wendig's trilogy of novels, Star Wars Aftermath, which, by the way, I'm just going to say it, I've heard it's horrible. This is from a big Star Wars fan that did not like Star Wars Aftermath. I'm just going to put that out there. Vanth makes a minor appearance in side chapters woven throughout the first novel as a lawman on Tatooine. Vanth, a former human slave who freed himself, procures a set of acid-stained Beskar armor from a group of Jawas that is heavily implied to be Boba Fett's. And it was discarded by the gluttonous Sarlacc after it seemingly munched him to death in Return of the Jedi. So I don't know, had you heard about this, Dave, or do you know anything about this character?
Okay, so let me start off by just saying this. I will watch just about anything with Timothy Olyphant in it. He's one of those actors that I have just enjoyed in everything I've seen him in. Whether you want to talk about Crazies, whether you want to talk about Deadwood, but more importantly, if you want to talk about Justified. I have talked about on this show how much I love the show Justified. If you have not seen Justified, if you're not familiar with Timothy Olyphant, if you're not really sure about what his deal is, go watch Justified. They have all the seasons available right now on Hulu, so you'll need a Hulu subscription, but they're all right there. So if you have a Hulu subscription, you can go watch Justified, and you can thank me later because it's a great show. But Timothy Olyphant is an incredible actor, and I love when he plays Western or Western influence or Western inspired characters. He embodies that sort of old style Western sort of hero / borderline outlaw kind of personality incredibly well. So I was just excited to hear that Timothy Olyphant was going to be in Mandalorian. I didn't care who he played. I was just excited that Olyphant was going to be in the show. Now, this is kind of interesting because I've read up a little bit on this, and I had been prepared to actually talk about this on tonight's show. But like I said, my email threw my show notes away. But the thing I want to bring up is this. I haven't read any of the new Star Trek novels. But
I mean Star Wars novels, right?
Star Wars, I'm sorry. Star Wars. My bad. Sorry about that. I haven't read the new Star Wars novels, but I am, based on what I've read, I know this is a character he could play incredibly well. And I think there's something interesting with this too, because I think there's the potential that he might actually be hunting the Mandalorian, within that same context of being a lawman. And it's kind of a fun way that we could have Boba Fett versus the Mandalorian, but when the Mandalorian wins, no one's going to cry foul because it's not really Boba Fett. So
That's an interesting idea right there.
yeah,
Now this article does go on because there were additional rumors about Boba Fett's return uh, to the series. It says, given that THR had also previously reported that Tamora Morrison, who played Jango Fett and the clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic in the Star Wars prequels, would be donning the armor of his clone's son in the season as well, and specifically noted that he would play Boba. Says this raises plenty of interesting questions about how Morrison's role will now play out if Oliphant's purported role turns out to be true. Will he be playing Boba Fett in flashbacks? Is Oliphant actually Vanth? Or someone like him who currently wears his armor, while the actual Boba Fett truly is digesting in that Sarlacc stomach? Or has Boba indeed survived and is now rather miffed that someone else is using his armor and his reputation in a way he may not necessarily agree with? That last premise, I would be okay with. I would be okay with that last premise there. But if we're not going to get Boba, I'm upset. I'm just putting it right out there. I'm upset if we're not getting Boba.
I have a theory that we are going to get Boba Fett, but what I think Boba Fett's going to be probably mostly in flashbacks, because there's also been there's always that connection with the Ugnaught characters. What is it? I have spoken. Is it Quill?
Quill, Quill.
Yeah, Quill.
That sounds right.
That he was actually possibly on Cloud City. But here's the thing: there's so much potential depending upon how they want to do this. For example, there could have been a time in which Boba Fett and the Mandalorian actually they ran a mission together, and maybe the Mandalorian knows who Boba Fett is. There's all kinds of interesting stuff that they could do with this.
But I don't want a flashback. I'm just going to put it out there. I want Boba Fett back. I think I've said it before. I think you have to do it because there would be no Mandalorian without Boba Fett. That's why I'm so adamant that I want Boba Fett. I want Boba Fett back.
Right. Well, see, and there's a lot of talk too that Tevin Morrison might actually be playing Captain Rex as well. So,
that'd be interesting. Well, I could see that because of Filoni, because it seems like he's bringing so many of his characters into this. You know what I mean? So that would be interesting. But I really want to see Boba Fett. I want Boba Fett.
See, let me just put it this way. If I was showrunner on this show, you would see Boba Fett. It would probably still be in sort of a flashback, but we'd have a version of Captain Rex, possibly in the current, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a way to work this out where it's still kind of fun. But I do kind of like the idea that it seems like Boba Fett is back, and then it turns out it's actually this imposter, pretending to be Boba Fett. I think there's some potential there. And then depending upon how you do the flashbacks, I still think it could be kind of fun. And like I said, at the end of the day, depending on how they set it up, it gives them the opportunity to have Boba Fett, or a version of Boba Fett versus the Mandalorian, where when the Mandalorian wins, I don't think anyone's going to cry foul because it's not the real Boba Fett. And there's nothing that says that the real Boba Fett couldn't be in the story. And I do like the idea that maybe he is upset that someone's impersonating him. You never know. He and the Mandalorian could go on a mission to get his armor back. That might be kind of fun. So
Chris Roberts mentions, I don't remember the whole story, but there is a story that is two Boba Fett's. One is real and the other is fake, living off the fame of Boba. And I believe that's part of the extended universe. I believe that was a story that was, officially discarded. But we do know that the current regime does steal from the EU quite frequently, frankly. Despite what Kathleen Kennedy has said, yes, there is other source material. Yes, there are books. Yes, there are other comics, and they steal from it all the time. While at the same time, throwing it away, off as it's not canon. So I am somewhat vaguely familiar with this story, Chris. I didn't read it. I believe it's one of the old EU novels. I could be mistaken, but I do recall a story like this being promoted somewhere, in the deep recesses of my data banks. So I think that's an interesting story. Like I said, that's the scenario that I would like to see. If these rumors are true, I would like to see Boba Fett back, and like Dave mentioned, perhaps they actually go to retrieve his armor, or you know, this guy is just sort of pretending to be Boba, but it turns out that Boba really is around. You know, I could go for that. I could definitely go for that. We'll just have to see which way they decide to go.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here, and Jon Favreau, because he comes from and has been such an important part of the MCU, and played a pivotal role there. I think he's seen where they take and they cherry pick sort of the best of the stories that have come before, and still sort of are somewhat faithful and kind of honor them, but still bring something kind of new to them, so that they're unique within the context of MCU, but they still harken back to something that the fans are familiar with, that are excited to see. So I wouldn't be surprised if they, and I know the story that Chris is referring to, it was in one of the Star Wars novels, collection of bounty hunter stories. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, he says it, yes, it is an EU novel, and that sounds familiar too, Dave. I remember there was a collection of short stories about all the bounty hunters from Empire Strikes Back. And I think I even leafed through that, like in a bookstore or something like that. Like I read some of it.
Yeah, and I used to own that one, and I read it a couple times, and it was really good. So I think that that's the thing. Because of who we know is helming up the Mandalorian, because we know that they respect and they like what Lucas has set up with his universe, and that, like I said, we know that Favreau, having been a part of the MCU, has seen where they will sometimes go, this is a great idea, and this is a great idea, and if we do this, it's still faithful, but it's kind of unique, and it could be fun. So I trust that between Favreau and Filoni, that if they have an interesting idea for what to do with Boba Fett, I think it'll be cool, and I'm interested to see what they do with it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm really just hoping that was Boba Fett, when we saw that assassin's body, and we heard the jangle, and we saw the shadow. That's what the rumor is, and I'm just really hoping that's Boba Fett.
Yeah,